Chalo guys, let's start with a section B question on capital taxes. And what are capital taxes? Your CGT, IHT together are your capital taxes. We were looking at question 39, which is Pescara. Now, this is a peculiar question. It has inheritance tax also, and it has elements of capital gain also. And questions like these are quite common in your ATX paper. You should assume that today's date is 1st of December 2025. Calculate the inheritance tax payable in respect of Marina's gift of the shares in Sepang PLC as a result of her death. Calculate Pescara's capital gains tax liability for the year 25-26 on the assumption that Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme SEIS relief is claimed in respect of the shares to be purchased on 1st of April 2026 and that business asset disposal relief is not available. State the capital gains tax implications of Pescara selling the SEIS shares at some point in the future. Explain how the proposed gift of UK property will be treated for the purposes of calculating the inheritance tax due on Pescara's death. You should assume that today's date is 1st of December. Pescara requires advice on inheritance tax payable on death. Okay. So, uh, you know, when you read the question, it will help you to narrow down कि यार जो आंसर लिखना है वो कहाँ से लिखना है. Okay. So, inheritance tax, by the way, is tested in three parts, right? Inheritance tax is lifetime IHT on lifetime gifts, then death IHT on lifetime gifts, and then there is the death estate. ठीक है. यहाँ पे let's see what the situation demands. Pescara is a higher rate taxpayer who is resident and domiciled in the UK. Pescara's father Galvez died on 1st of June 2008. Pescara's mother Marina died on 1st of October 2025. Both Galvez and Marina were resident and domiciled in the UK. Galvez had not made, that is, the father had not made any lifetime gifts. In his will, Galvez left cash of 80,000 to Pescara and a further 80,000 to Pescara's brother. Galvez left the remainder of his estate to his wife Marina. Any transfer made to the wife will be an exempt legacy. है ना? Interspouse transfers are exempt legacies. Marina lifetime gifts on 1st February 2020. Marina gave Pescara 3,75,000 shares in Sepang PLC. Marina had made no other lifetime gifts. Marina gift of 3,75,000 shares in Pescara in Sepang PLC to Pescara. 1st of Jan 2017, Marina purchased the shares for 420. 1st of Feb 2020, Marina gave all of the shares to Pescara. The shares were quoted at 1.84, 1.96. The highest and the lowest marked bargains were 1.80 and 1.92. The shares did not qualify for business property relief or capital gains tax gift holdover relief. Inheritance tax nil rate band for the year 8-9 was 3,12,000. Okay. अब आपको क्या क्या निकालना है? You have to first of all calculate the inheritance tax payable in respect of what? Inheritance tax payable in respect of Marina's gift of shares in Sepang PLC as a result of her death. So the mother, who is Marina? Marina is the mother. The mother died on 1st of October 25. She gave a gift to her daughter, that is Pescara, and on that there is an inheritance tax implication which you are supposed to calculate. ठीक है? For that, what is the first calculation that we need to do? The first calculation that we need to do is we need to calculate the transfer of value. Do you agree? अपने को transfer of value निकालना पड़ेगा. अब transfer of value है and we are calculating it for the inheritance tax purposes. Okay, so it will be lower of the quarter up method or the mid market value. That is how valuation is done in case of inheritance tax. Okay, so here let's make the working notes on the side. Working notes. Working note 1. Valuation of shares in Sepang Limited. Okay, this will be, see ये lower of है, lower of the following. First is quarter up method and the second thing is mid market value. है ना? मिड मार्केट वैल्यू. नाउ व्हाट इज द क्वार्टर अप मेथड? इधर देखो. The shares were quoted at 1.84 to 1.96. If you are doing the quarter up method, how is the valuation done? 1.84 plus one fourth of 1.96 minus 1.84, है ना? 1.96 minus 1.84 कितना आएगा? 1.84 plus 1 by 4 into 1.96 minus 1.84, 1.87. एंड मिड मार्केट वैल्यू अगर लेना है तो विल बी 1.80 प्लस 1.9, तो हाईएस्ट एंड लोवेस्ट मार्क्ड बार्गेन्स का एवरेज लेना पड़ेगा आपको, है ना? सो 1.80 प्लस 1.92, 1.86. ठीक है. What is the lower of the two? 1.86 is the lower of the two. So this will be used for valuation of shares. Now, solution. अपने को अल्टीमेटली क्या निकालना है? वी हैव टू कैलकुलेट IHT पेएबल इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ मरीनाज गिफ्ट ऑफ शेयर्स. सो पार्ट ए ऑफ द आंसर, ट्रांसफर ऑफ वैल्यू, वर्किंग नोट 1. कितना होगा ट्रांसफर ऑफ वैल्यू? बेसिकली देर आर 3,75,000 शेयर्स इंटू 1.86 पर शेयर. ठीक है. 3,75,000 इंटू 1.86, 697,500 less annual exemption. Now, the mother Marina, has she made any other gifts in her lifetime? No, she has not made any other lifetime gifts. When was the gift made? The gift was made on February 20, है ना? So annual exemption 1920 minus 3,000. Annual exemption 1819 brought forward minus 3,000. ठीक है. So what will you get? 697,500 minus 3,000 minus 3,000, 691,500. ठीक है. अब from this we'll have to subtract nil rate band. This is her first lifetime transfer. Rather, this is her first transfer, not lifetime. This is her first transfer ever. So minus 3,25,000. अब इसका जो husband है Galvez gave cash of 80,000 to Pescara, 80,000 to Pescara's brother, remaining of his estate he transferred to his wife. And in that particular year, in the year 8-9, how much was the nil rate band? 3,12,000, right? So working note 2 is calculation of unused nil rate band. ठीक है. और value of total gifts given by Galvez. I am saying excluding gift made to his wife, which is an exempt legacy. How much? 80,000 to Pescara, 80,000 to the son. Okay. So, and total NRB available in 2008-9. How much is NRB available? 3,12,000. ठीक है. NRB available 3,12,000. Amount gifted 80 plus 80, 160. ठीक है. And Galvez died on 1st of June 2008. So उस ईयर का We have 3,12,000 total NRB. Uh, Gifts given two people other than his wife, 1,60,000. So NRB used in case of Galvez. How much is the NRB used? 1,60,000. So how much is the unused NRB? Unused NRB will be 3,12,000 minus 1,60,000.
1,52,000.
1,52,000. And what is percentage of unused NRB? 152 upon 3,12,000. Somewhere around 48.72%. ठीक है. अब NRB applicable for Marina year 2019-20, not 2019-20, whenever she died. 3,25,000. So NRB transferred from husband Galvez. This will be 3,25,000 into 48.72%. है ना? 158,333. ये unused NRB है. This is transfer of NRB from the spouse. Less nil rate band transferred. 158,333. ठीक है. So 691,500 minus 325 minus 158,333 is how much? You will get your taxable amount as 691,500 minus 325 minus 158,333, 208,167. ठीक है. The person is dead. So inheritance tax at the rate of 40% will be this into 40%, 83,267. Okay. Now this is not the end of the question. Marina died on 1st of February. Marina gave Pescara the shares. And when did Marina die? On 1st of October 2025. ठीक है. 1st of Feb 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. More than 5, less than 6. तो यहां पे लगेगा आपका टेपर रिलीफ, राइट? लेस टेपर रिलीफ 60%. More than 5 years, less than 6 years. This into 60%. ठीक है. How much will be your inheritance tax payable? 33,307. This is a pure technical question, expecting you to apply all the provisions in inheritance tax, 2 working notes and the IHT working. ठीक है. एक बार working देख लो. I'll be back in a moment and we'll continue. एक बार देख लो working अच्छे से. Now, calculate Pescara's CGT liability for tax year 25-26 on the assumption that Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme relief is claimed in respect of the shares to be purchased on 1st of April 26 and that business asset disposal relief is not available. ठीक है. So you have to calculate her capital gains tax liability for the year 25-26. Now look at this one. Acquisition of Sepang PLC by Zolder and subsequent bonus issue. 1st of Jan, Zolder PLC acquired the whole of the ordinary share capital of Sepang PLC. Pescara received 30 pence and two ordinary shares in Zolder PLC worth $1 each for each share in Sepang PLC. The takeover was for genuine commercial reasons and not for the avoidance of tax. Zolder PLC declared a 2 for 1 bonus issue. 15th November 2025, 10 lakh shares in Zolder PLC were sold for 4 lakh 45,000. On 15, on sorry, on 1st of April 2026, Pescara purchased qualifying SEIS shares for 90,000. Okay. Now you know the sale proceeds, but you will now need to calculate the cost. Okay. Ab the shares in Zolder PLC were earlier shares in Sepang PLC. Okay. And the shares in Sepang PLC were given to Pescara from her mother. Okay. Now, for capital gains purposes, you will have to see the shares were quoted at 1.84, 1.96. Okay. And her mother gave the shares to her. Pescara did not buy the shares herself. The shares were gifted to her. Correct. So, इसमें क्या होगा? First of all, you will have to calculate the there are 3,75,000 shares. उसका आपको सबसे पहले cost of acquisition निकालना पड़ेगा. Right. अब, how do you calculate the cost of acquisition of these shares? You did not purchase the shares. Okay. These shares were gifted to you by your mother. So in that case, the valuation of shares will be the average of 1.84 and 1.96. Correct. The valuation rules for capital gains are slightly different as compared to the valuation rules for inheritance tax. And capital gains is a lifetime tax. Working notes 1. So for the first working note is value of shares in Sepang PLC. What is the mid price? It has to be 1.84 plus 1.96 divided by 2, which is 1.90. So deemed acquisition cost of 3,75,000 shares will be 3,75,000 into 1.90. How much will that be? 3,75,000 into 1.90. 7,12,500 होगा आपका deemed cost of acquisition of 3,75,000 shares. ठीक है. अब what else is happening? 1st of Jan, Zolder PLC acquired the whole of the ordinary shares of Sepang PLC. Pescara received 30 pence and two ordinary shares in Zolder PLC worth $1 each for each share in Sepang. So for every share that she held, what did she get? She got 30 pence ka cash and two she got two shares of $1. Correct? So working note 2. These are calculations on takeover. For every share in Sepang PLC that is acquired, the shareholder got 30 pence cash and two equity shares of one of pound one each of GBP one each for every one share held in Sepang PLC. ठीक है. अब इसमें क्या करेंगे? अब how many shares was she holding? She was holding shares of Sepang held by Pescara, 3,75,000. ठीक है. She had 3,75,000 shares of Pescara. Now, cash received in exchange of Sepang shares. Cash received in exchange of Sepang shares. 3,75,000 shares into 0.30 pounds per share. कितना कैश मिला? 1,12,500. एंड व्हाट इज द शेयर कंसिडरेशन? है ना, कितने का शेयर कंसिडरेशन मिला? लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड दैट. You for every one share held in Sepang, you got two equity shares of £1 each, right? So value of share consideration received, 3,75,000 shares into two shares into £1 per share. ठीक है. कितना हो जाएगा? 7,50,000. So what is the total consideration? 1,12,500 plus 7,50,000. This is the value of total consideration received. She gave her shares in company were taken up. 3,75,000 shares in Sepang were taken up, and in exchange she got cash and the she got shares in the other company. Okay. Now, what is the allocation of original cost of acquisition? वो कैसे होगा? So for cash, ठीक है. What is the original cost of acquisition? 7,12,500. ठीक है. 7,12,500 into न्यूमरेटर में होगा 1,12,500 divided by 862,500. 7,12,500 into 1,12,500 upon 862,500. 92,935. And for shares, न्यूमरेटर में आएगा 7,50,000. So again 7,12,500 into this upon this, 619,565. ठीक है. ये हो गया आपका स्प्लिट ऑफ कॉस्ट. नाउ अब वील गो बैक टू द बोनस इशू हुआ और पता नहीं व्हाट ऑल हैपेंड. सो वहां पे अपने को वी हैव टू कैलकुलेट द अमाउंट ऑफ कैपिटल गेन. ठीक है. सो वर्किंग नोट 3, कैलकुलेशन ऑफ कॉस्ट फॉर शेयर्स डिस्पोज्ड ऑफ. ठीक है. पर्टिकुलर्स, नंबर एंड पाउंड वैल्यू. ठीक है. अब see, we are talking about shares in, earlier what did you have? You had original shares in Sepang. कितना शेयर था आपके पास? You had 3,75,000 shares. What was the pound value? 7,12,500 was the pound value. ठीक है. ये आपका starting point था. What did you get in exchange? This was basically market value of gift. This is exchanged for shares in Zolder PLC. Cost of new shares, कितना shares मिला आपको? You got 7,50,000 new shares whose cost is 619,565. And then if you observe, आगे लिखा है on 1st of July 2023 Zolder declared a 2-for-1 bonus issue. है ना? क्या हुआ बाद में? You had a bonus issue 2:1. See, whenever a bonus issue happens, number of shares increases. Value में कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. Value does not change at all. Number of shares changes. ठीक है. So ये हो गया. अब now you have what? Now you have the total number. Okay. Now this is the total number of shares in hand. So let me call this total. Now cost of shares sold. How many shares are sold? 10 lakh shares are sold. So the cost will be 275, 362. ये क्या होगा? This will be by cross multiplication. ठीक है. आपको अल्टीमेटली निकालना क्या है? You have to calculate the capital gain on disposal. ठीक है. इतना सारा वर्किंग नोट क्यों किया? फॉर कैलकुलेशन ऑफ कैपिटल गेन. Calculation of capital gain on disposal. What are the sale proceeds? कितने में बेचा? 4,45,000 was the sale value. So from that you will subtract cost of acquisition. कितना है आपका cost of acquisition? 275, 362. ये माइनस किया, इसके बाद आपको मिलेगा चार्जेबल गेन 445 माइनस 275, 362. अब उसके बाद you have invested 90,000 in SEIS shares. Now, how does the SEIS relief work? Do you remember? Vedant, how does the SEIS relief work?
For capital gain or for income tax purpose?
Capital gains.
Sir, for if like gain on shares, we are holding it for 3 years, then they are exempt. And if we are disposing them, then we calculate the maximum exemption amount, which is 50% of lower of gain, or the amount that we are amount that is reinvested in the qualifying shares for IT relief that is claimed.
Okay. So amount of capital gain related exemption is 50% of the lower of amount of gain or amount reinvested in qualifying SEIS shares on which IT relief is claimed. Here, amount invested is 90,000, uska 50%, right? Minus 45,000. Okay. And less annual exempt amount 3,000. You will get taxable gain. 121,638. CGT at the rate of 20%. 24,328. This is the amount of CGT liability. हायर रेट टैक्स पेयर है तो नेचुरली उसके हिसाब से ही होगा. Now this question, main calculation तो सिर्फ इतना है, but for that there is a share valuation that you had to do. Then you had calculations on takeover. उसमें you had to do proportionate calculations. Then cost of shares, कैलकुलेशन ऑफ कॉस्ट फॉर शेयर्स डिस्पोज्ड ऑफ, वो वाला कैलकुलेशन। सो काफी सारा एकदम इन डेप्थ टेक्निकल क्वेश्चन था। ओके, दिस वाज एन इन डेप्थ टेक्निकल क्वेश्चन एंड यू हैड टू बी वेरी वेरी फोकस्ड in terms of applying the provisions. This is not one of those theory and calculation mix नहीं है ये, एकदम प्योर थियोरी, मतलब सॉरी प्योर प्रोविजन एंड कैलकुलेशन ऐसा साथ में आपको देखना है। ओके, यू कैन नॉट डू वन एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ द अदर। सो लर्निंग द प्रोविजंस इज द वे टू सॉल्व दिस टाइप ऑफ अ क्वेश्चन। इसमें आपको कुछ भी पूछना है, प्लीज लेट मी नो।
So if you can scroll down a bit.
श्योर, एक एक करके आप पूरे वर्किंग नोट्स देखो, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। लुक एट द टेक ओवर कैलकुलेशंस। Tell me when you want me to scroll, I will scroll down. Now, questions like these have become a little rare because now their focus has shifted to part calculation, part application ऐसा. This is like a very heavy technical question that way.
सर मोस्टली जहाँ पे भी रेट्स दिए हुए हैं हमें, इवन इन रेगुलर लेक्चर्स, वो सारे हमें एग्जाम में अवेलेबल होंगे ना, अपार्ट फ्रॉम
हाँ।
जहाँ लिमिट का होता है, जो प्रोविजन का पार्ट होता है 5% और लोअर, वो सब नहीं होगा, लेकिन रेट्स जहाँ जहाँ मेंशन्ड है वो सब होंगे ना एग्जाम में।
यस, जैसे कुछ कुछ रेट्स नहीं होता है, बट व्हेन वी हैव डिस्कस्ड इट इन क्लास, मैंने स्पेसिफिकली बताया है कि भाई ये नहीं आने वाला, मतलब ये रेट नहीं दिया रहेगा तो ये लर्न करना।
हाँ, वो मैंने स्पेसिफिकली एक्सेल में भी हाईलाइट कर दिया जहाँ जहाँ आप लेक्चर में बोल रहे हो वो।
या ठीक है,
ये
चलो। अब क्वेश्चन कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ है बाय द वे। State the capital gains tax implications of Pescara selling the SEIS shares at some point in the future. Now, if she sells the SEIS shares, see, that depends on when the shares are sold. If they are sold within 3 years of their purchase, any gain arising will be chargeable, loss will be allowable. If they are sold after 3 years of their purchase date, then any gain arising will be exempt. So, just quickly writing it down, part B इसका, पार्ट बी का 1 था, देन पार्ट बी का 2, और CGT implications on disposal of SEIS shares will depend on when is the shares, when are the shares sold. If sold within 3 years of the date of acquisition, then gain is taxable and loss is exempt. Sorry, and loss is allowed. Sorry, gain is taxable and loss is allowed. If sold after 3 years from the date of acquisition, then gain is exempt, right? Then gain is exempt in that case. And loss, if the sale results in a loss, तब क्या होगा? Loss will be allowable, but it will be reduced by the SEIS income tax relief obtained in respect of the shares. ठीक है? Along with that, if SEIS shares are sold within 3 years, all or part of the capital gains tax reinvestment relief will be withdrawn, depending on the number of shares sold and whether or not it is sold at an arm's length price. आपको वो भी एक discussion याद होगा that we had done towards the end, right? So, if the shares are sold before the due date, then the CGT relief that you had given in the past, that CGT relief will be withdrawn. ठीक है? So, this is another part of the question. अब एक लास्ट पार्ट है, ठीक है, वो थोड़ा अगेन इट इज अ proposed calculation. Explain how the proposed gift of UK property will be treated for the purposes of calculating inheritance tax due on Pescara's death. Proposed gift of UK property. Pescara intends to give a UK property to her son on 1st of October 2026. Pescara intends to continue to use this property rent-free such that the gift will be a gift with reservation. If you have finished the IHT का discussion, ठीक है, और IHT के discussion में there is a topic called gifts with reservation of benefit. Okay, now how does this topic gifts with reservation of benefit work? थोड़ा सा try to cast your mind to that particular topic. ठीक है? Now, in this case, what is Pescara doing? She will continue to stay in that property. Okay, property son को दे तो दिया, but she will continue to stay in that property. Now, in that case, the gift of property will be a potentially exempt transfer. The value of this PET will be the market value of property at the time of the gift. ठीक है? So let's write that down. Part C. The gift of property to son will be a potentially exempt transfer, PET. Okay. Now, the value of this PET will be the market value of property at the time of the gift. The value of PET will be market value of property at the time of gift. The amount which will be subject to IHT, वो क्या होगा? Depends on whether or not the benefit is lifted. Amount subjected to IHT will depend on whether or not the reservation is lifted and at what time. ठीक है? Now, if the reservation is lifted before Pescara's death, there will be a future PET equal to the value of property at that time. If reservation is still in place when Pescara dies, the value of the property at the time of death will be included in her death estate. Okay, so if reservation is lifted before her death, तो क्या होगा? There will be a future PET equal to the value of property at that time. Okay, and this will be chargeable if Pescara dies within 7 years. And if reservation is lifted, or if reservation is still in place when Pescara dies, let's put it that way. If reservation is still in place at the time of her death, तो क्या होगा? Value of property at the time of her death will be included in death estate. value of property at the time of death will be included in death estate. ठीक है. And RNRB will be available. In this case, RNRB will be available because the lift is passing to a lineal descendant. उसके बेटे को जा रहा है, which is why RNRB will be available. ठीक है. सो गिफ्ट्स विद रिजर्वेशन ऑफ बेनिफिट अपना इनहेरिटेंस टैक्स में एक सेपरेट डिस्कशन है. मेक श्योर दैट यू हैव गॉन थ्रू इट प्रॉपर्ली बिकॉज उस पर क्वेश्चन आया है. वेरी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन, बट फॉर दैट आपको रिजर्वेशन ऑफ बेनिफिट वाला पॉइंट याद रखना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. यू विल हैव टू रिमेंबर दैट पॉइंट इफ यू हैव टू अटेम्प्ट अ क्वेश्चन लाइक दिस. ठीक है. सो दिस इज, इफ यू हैवंट डन इट, नेचुरली अभी आपको एकदम से स्ट्राइक नहीं होगा. ओनली व्हेन यू डू द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ गिफ्ट्स विद रिजर्वेशन ऑफ बेनिफिट यू विल बी एबल टू रिकलेक्ट द प्रोविजन. और फिर एकदम स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड थियोरी क्वेश्चन है ये. दे हैव नॉट आस्क्ड यू एनी कैलकुलेशन, दे हैव ओनली आस्क्ड यू कि एक्सप्लेन द टैक्स implications. ओके, और कुछ भी नहीं बोला है. दे हैव आस्क्ड यू जस्ट द टैक्स implications, सो आपको उसको जस्ट थियोरेटिकली एक्सप्लेन करके यू कैन मूव अहेड. ठीक है. Now let's do this question. Again, I'll give you 5 minutes to read. आप पढ़ो, then we'll discuss it together. ठीक है? Take 5 minutes, read the question carefully, then we'll discuss. ना पूरा second question शायद record ही नहीं हुआ है. Weird. Anyway, so when you talk about variation of a will, in variation of a will, your focus should be on stating the fact that variation will be done only for CGT IHT purposes. Okay, for no other purposes variation done, and it must be made by the persons who would benefit from that variation. उन लोगों ने ही they should sign off and they should specifically mention that the variation is happening only with an intention to alter the CGT and IHT implications. ठीक है. अब उससे क्या क्या बेनिफिट होगा? अच्छा, you should also understand that the benefits from the variation, उसमें you will increase the contribution to charity. When you increase the contribution to charity, naturally there will be a reduction in the amount of IHT liability, right? And the variation is basically what, for what purpose? The variation is done in order to uh, be- in order to bring about a reduction in CGT IHT liability or for better management, not for any other purpose. और क्या क्या वेरिएशन का इम्पैक्ट आपको यहाँ पे देखना है? What all are you supposed to talk about here? आप इसमें देखिए CGT purposes के लिए and IHT purposes के लिए. For IHT purpose, without the variation, the gift of, you know, एक तो the gift of house by Raymer to her son would be a PET for the purpose of inheritance tax and would become a chargeable transfer if Raymer were to die within 7 years of the date of the gift. So directly आप grandson को transfer करा दो. Or don't transfer to Raymer, because if you transfer to Raymer at that time RNRB will be there. But if Raymer transfers it to the son during her lifetime, तो उस पे फिर वो पीईटी बन जाएगा. यहाँ पे क्या लिखा है? यहाँ पे स्पेसिफिकली आपको लिख के दिया है इन दिस क्वेश्चन that Raymer says that I do not intend to live it and to live in the house, but I will give it to my son. If he gives it to if she gives it to her son, तो क्या होगा? It is transfer by one individual to another individual, तो वो बन जाएगा potentially exempt transfer. फिर अगर potentially exempt transfer बन गया तो रेमर के डेथ पे if रेमर dies within 7 years of the date of that gift, तो उस पे फिर टैक्स लगेगा. तो to avoid that, why don't you do one thing? Why don't you transfer directly from the mother to the grandson ना? काडा से directly transfer to her grandson, that is Raymer's son. बीच में रेमर को दो ही मत. Still you will get the benefit of RNRB. Why? Because RNRB में it's not necessary that you have to give it to your son. RNRB में you have to give it to your a lineal descendant, right? So variation of will. inheritance tax. Right now, Will transfers the house to Raymer, who is daughter of Cada. And Raymer does not intend to stay there, but wants to transfer it to her son. If the house is first transferred to Raymer and then to her son, the transfer to son will be a potentially exempt transfer. And if Raymer dies within 7 years of date of gift, then it will be taxable. The will can be varied in such a way that the house gets transferred directly to Raymer's son. RNRB will still apply, and one leg of taxation can be avoided. ठीक है? Now, this is from an inheritance tax perspective, right? From a capital gains tax perspective, see, if you don't make the variation, the proposed gift of house by Raymer to her son will result in a chargeable gain, right? And PRR will not be available as Raymer does not intend to stay in the house. So CGT purposes के लिए भी it will be helpful. If Raymer does not live in the house and transfers it to her son as a gift, there will be capital gains tax implications on transfer. If the deed is varied, there is no CGT at all. ठीक है, तो वो CGT भी आप अवॉइड कर सकते हो, है ना? प्लस gift to charity, the gift to charity or if gift to charity is 78,000, then IHT rate is reduced. And right now, the gift amount is how much? The gift amount is 60,000. If this gift amount is to be increased, it can only be achieved by variation of will. तो जब तक आप will में चेंजेस नहीं करोगे ये पॉसिबल नहीं होगा आपके लिए, ठीक है? And then of course the procedure for variation of will, the parties have to agree, it has to be in writing, and it should explicitly state that it is for CGT and IHT purposes, not for anything else, ठीक है? And the last part, in relation to CGT, explain what beneficial actions CADA would have carried out in the tax year of her death in respect of her shareholdings. ठीक है, shareholding का value at the time of death is given. Give me a moment, I'll be back and then we'll continue. एक second दो. Okay. Now, in relation to CGT, explain what beneficial actions Cada could have carried out in the tax year of her death. What could she have done here? See, following her death, the capital gains tax base cost of shareholding is equal to the market value at the date of death. So, what will happen is any losses which were accrued up to the date of death will no longer be available for relief. What she could have done is Cada could have sold the shares in FRPLC. See, FRPLC ka shares are valued at less than their cost. She could have sold the shares to, book capital losses. These capital losses could have been set off against any other chargeable gains that she had during the period, right? And in respect of KZ Limited shares, ये देखो KZ Limited shares का value is nil. She could have made a negligible value claim. You remember what is the negligible value claim in capital gains? एकदम स्टार्टिंग के टॉपिक्स में वी हैव डिस्कस्ड दिस. आई थिंक सीजीटी बेसिक्स का जो वीडियो है उसमें वी हैव डिस्कस द नेग्लिजिबल वैल्यू क्लेम. डू यू रिमेंबर व्हाट इज दैट? आई विल टेक यू टू द शीट. ये देखो. If the value of an asset becomes negligible for whatever reason, the owner may claim relief. The owner is then treated as having disposed of and immediately reacquired the asset at its negligible value. This treatment crystallizes a capital loss. So आपको क्या करना है? Treat the asset as if it is disposed of at its negligible value. Deemed if the negligible value is 200, ठीक है? 200 minus cost of acquisition करो, 7,800 का capital loss book हो जाएगा. Assume that the asset is reacquired at the same value, and then you continue to carry it in your books of accounts, sorry, in your books of accounts at that particular value. यहाँ पे भी KZ Limited का shares have become nil, तो इसके केस में you can get a negligible value claim. and FRPLC के shares which are valued at less than cost, उसको बेचो, उसमें capital loss book करो, वो capital loss को you can sell the JW Limited shares at a profit, and you could offset it that way. And capital losses in excess of chargeable gains could have been, so that adjustment would have become possible if she would have sold the shares in the last year. Up she hasn't done that naturally, so she is not getting that benefit at the moment. Okay, so this is where this is how your creative mind should work, and this is how the calculations also have to be done. Just make sure that whenever you are attempting a question, you are taking into consideration all the possible scenarios that can take place, and do not restrict yourself only to the specific, matlab, just don't have a one track mind here. Just make sure that you are considering all the possible circumstances and then you are answering the question. Okay, so keep that in mind, and let's let's build on that. Okay, so whenever you are attempting questions on this front, just make sure कि यार आप provisions अच्छे से याद करो so that you can recreate that in the paper. ठीक है. Learning the provisions is super critical for your ATX paper. AFM वगैरह में तो चलो लॉजिक के बेसिस पे हो जाता है, but ATX you will have to learn. ठीक है. चलो.